As humanity slowly recovered from the shock of the Galactic Council's ban, the realization began to set in. Earth was now a pariah, a planet isolated from the rest of the galaxy. No longer able to explore the stars or engage in intergalactic trade, humanity's future seemed bleak. Yet, in the midst of this crisis, a hidden truth began to emerge, a truth that could change everything. Deep within Earth's underground military facilities, remnants of old wars and ancient alien technology lay forgotten. Some said they were just myths, leftover artifacts from the first contact with extraterrestrial species centuries ago. Others dismissed them as useless relics. But now, as humanity's rebellion against the Galactic Council began to take form, these forgotten pieces of technology would become the spark of a new hope. The story began in a dimly lit warehouse beneath a small town in North America. Sergeant Michael Graves and his team had been tasked with scouring these old military bunkers for any useful equipment that might help the growing rebellion. Graves wasn't sure what he expected to find: old weapons, maybe, or some leftover ships. What he didn't expect was the sight that greeted him in the far corner of the facility. It wasn't much at first glance, just a pile of rusted metal and dusty crates. But something about it caught his attention. There, partially covered by a torn tarp, lay a sleek, metallic object. It was unlike anything Graves had ever seen. Its shape both familiar and alien at the same time. Its surface shimmered with an iridescent glow, and the edges seemed to hum with a quiet energy. His heart raced as he motioned for his team to approach. "Get over here now," he ordered, his voice filled with awe. His team, initially skeptical, now rushed forward, drawn by the magnetic pull of the mysterious object. "Is it alien?" Elena, one of the lead engineers, asked, her voice barely a whisper. She ran her hand over the surface, her fingers tingling with the touch. "This isn't from Earth." Graves nodded. He had spent enough time in military operations to recognize a weapon when he saw one. But this wasn't just any weapon. This was something different, something dangerous. "What do you think it is?" Graves asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "I don't know," Elena said, her brow furrowed as she examined it. "But if I'm right, this isn't just a weapon. It looks like a power core." "A power core," Graves repeated, not understanding at first. Elena smiled, her eyes lighting up with excitement. "Yes, but not just any power core. This could be the key to reversing the Council's technological advantage over us. If we can understand how to harness its energy, we might just have a chance." The team quickly got to work, carefully extracting the object and transporting it to their makeshift lab. As they analyzed the core, they discovered something incredible. The object wasn't just a power source, it was a map. It wasn't like anything they had ever seen before, with symbols and coordinates they couldn't decipher. But the sheer complexity of it spoke volumes. This was far more than just a relic. It was a key to something much bigger. Weeks passed as the engineers and scientists pored over the alien device, working tirelessly to understand its purpose. The map led them to an isolated location in the Arctic, where they believed they would find the answers to their questions. But the deeper they went, the more they realized just how far the Galactic Council's reach extended, and how much Earth had been kept in the dark. As the team prepared to venture out to the Arctic site, the rebellion began to gather momentum. More and more factions from around the world joined the cause, united by the idea of defying the Council. They knew they had to act fast. If the Council discovered their efforts, Earth's rebellion would be crushed before it even had a chance to take off. One evening, as Graves sat in his small command room, going over battle plans and strategizing, Elena entered, holding a datapad in her hands. Her expression was serious. "Sergeant," she said, her voice low, "we've decrypted some of the data from the map." Graves looked up from his work, his curiosity piqued. "What did you find?" Elena took a breath, then spoke. "The map points to a hidden alien outpost. It's located on a moon orbiting a nearby gas giant, far outside Council territory. It's been abandoned for centuries, but it contains technology that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. Graves stood up, the weight of her words sinking in. This was the breakthrough they had been waiting for. A hidden base full of alien technology. It was humanity's best chance to turn the tide. They had to go there, and quickly. But there was a problem. The Council's surveillance network was vast. Even if the rebellion kept their movements hidden, there was no guarantee they would reach the moon undetected. And if they did, they would be in direct conflict with the Council's fleet, which was always watching, always ready to strike. Elena's voice broke through his thoughts. We need a plan. If we don't act soon, the Council will find out what we're doing, and that's the end of everything. Graves exhaled sharply, his eyes narrowing with determination. We'll get there. We have to. The next day, they began preparing for the dangerous mission. The rebellion's fleet was small, only a handful of modified ships, stolen and repurposed from past military conflicts. They weren't equipped for direct combat with the Council's forces, but they didn't need to be. They just needed to get in, get the technology, and get out. As they left Earth's atmosphere, Graves couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. The stars around them were silent, cold. But somewhere, beyond the edges of the galaxy, the Council was aware. They knew that humanity was making its move, and they wouldn't let them get away with it. The rebellion's journey into deep space had only just begun, and already the stakes were higher than they could have imagined. As the ships hurtled toward the moon marked on the map, Graves couldn't help but wonder. Would they find salvation, or would this mission be humanity's final mistake? The future of Earth rested in their hands, and it was a future that had just begun to unfold. The rebellion had begun, and the spark of hope was alive. As humanity's resistance grew stronger with each passing day, a sense of urgency filled the air. There was no turning back now. The Galactic Council, still oblivious to the full scale of humanity's plans, was growing more suspicious, more watchful. And with every move Earth made, the risk of exposure and annihilation grew larger. But within this chaos, something extraordinary was unfolding. The map, the one that had appeared on the mysterious alien device, had led them to a hidden research facility buried beneath the Arctic ice. It was there, deep within the frozen landscape, that they hoped to uncover the secrets the Galactic Council had kept from humanity for so long. The facility was old, almost ancient by human standards, but its significance was undeniable. It had been abandoned for centuries, its purpose long forgotten. Or so they thought. Sergeant Michael Graves, the leader of the resistance, had been chosen to lead the mission. As he gazed out over the snow-covered plains of the Arctic, a feeling of unease settled in his chest. The sky was an eerie shade of gray, clouds swirling in the distance, as if something was lurking just out of sight. He couldn't shake the sense that they were being watched by forces far more powerful than they could imagine. Graves, Elena said, her voice pulling him from his thoughts. She stood beside him, her breath visible in the cold air, her eyes scanning the horizon. We're ready. The team's prepped, and the transport ship is secured. The data we've been working with shows that the facility is right beneath us. Graves nodded, trying to steady his nerves. I know. Let's move out. The team descended into the facility's depths, a sprawling underground complex that seemed to stretch forever. The walls were made of a strange metallic substance, far more durable than anything humanity had ever seen. As they walked deeper into the facility, the silence around them became almost deafening. No sounds of life, no signs of movement, only the low hum of ancient machinery. They had no idea who had built this place or why, but they were about to find out. They reached a central chamber, and Elena stepped forward, her hands trembling as she approached a large console embedded in the floor. It was completely alien in design, the symbols on the interface completely foreign. But with years of experience in reverse engineering alien technology, Elena quickly began decoding it, her fingers flying over the strange buttons. The escape from the Arctic facility had been harrowing, but it was only the beginning. The knowledge they'd uncovered was both a blessing and a curse. Humanity now had the blueprint for the most dangerous weapons ever created, weapons that could devastate entire worlds. But what good was that information if they couldn't stop the Galactic Council from using them first? Back on Earth, the rebellion's momentum was growing, but so was the Council's surveillance. Despite the escape, despite the vital data they had retrieved, Earth's rebels were still vastly outnumbered and outmatched. The Galactic Council's fleets patrolled the outer rim of the solar system, ensuring no ship could leave or enter Earth's atmosphere undetected. And yet, humanity wasn't backing down. Not anymore. Sergeant Michael Graves and Alina sat in the command room of their makeshift base, surrounded by maps, data screens, and strategists. The room was alive with energy, but beneath that energy lay an underlying tension. Everyone knew that time was running out. The Council would be coming for them soon. The rebellion's window of opportunity was shrinking fast. "We have to hit them before they realize what we're planning," Graves said, his voice sharp with determination. "We have one shot at this." Alina nodded, her eyes scanning the data on the screen before her. "We've decrypted most of the schematics from the facility. The weapons are powerful, yes, but they're not invincible. If we can find a way to disrupt their core systems, we might stand a chance." Graves leaned back in his chair, hands folded behind his head, trying to absorb the gravity of the situation. "And how do we disrupt their core systems?" Alina hesitated for a moment. "There's a hidden weakness in their technology. One that's not obvious. They've been so focused on their power and control that they overlooked a flaw in their intergalactic communication network." Graves looked at her, confused. "Their communication network?" "Yes," Alina said, her fingers tapping on the table as she thought. "The Council relies on constant communication between their satellite hubs and fleet ships. If we can infiltrate and scramble their communications, they won't be able to coordinate their forces. We'll have a brief window to launch a strike. A well-placed attack could cripple them." It was a risky plan, but it was the only one they had. The rebellion had no real fleet of their own, only stolen ships and makeshift transports. They couldn't engage in a traditional battle. Not yet. But they could strike at the heart of the Council's operations, disrupt their coordination, and gain an upper hand. The plan was simple: infiltrate the nearest Council communication hub, located on one of their largest orbital stations, just outside Earth's orbit. There, they would install a device capable of jamming the Council's entire communication network. If they could pull it off, it would be a crippling blow. Without communication, the Council's ships would be isolated, vulnerable. But they would have to be quick. They only had a few hours before the Council realized something was amiss, and any delay could result in total failure. Graves and Alina gathered their team. It was a small force, just a handful of elite soldiers, engineers, and tech specialists. They were humanity's best, but even they knew the odds were stacked against them. The mission would be dangerous, perhaps even suicidal. But it was a chance they couldn't pass up. As the team prepared for departure, the atmosphere was tense. Everyone knew the risks. Graves couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The Council had been watching them closely, but they had no idea just how much the rebellion had uncovered. He couldn't help but wonder if the Council knew more than they were letting on, if they had somehow anticipated this move. But there was no turning back. The mission had already begun. They'd boarded their makeshift fleet, 2 battered ships that had once been military cargo vessels. They were hardly the fastest or most advanced ships, but they were enough to get the team close to the Council's orbital station. Graves didn't say much as they lifted off. His mind was racing with thoughts of what was at stake. Earth's future rested on this mission. If they failed, it would be the end of the rebellion. As the ships left Earth's atmosphere, a feeling of isolation washed over Graves. Out in the void of space, they were alone, just a few ships, against the might of the Galactic Council. The cold vastness of space seemed to stretch on forever, an endless sea of stars and nothingness. Elena's voice broke through his thoughts. "We'll be at the station in 2 hours. Once we get there, we'll have to move fast. The Council's sensors are sharp. They'll notice us within minutes if we don't stay undetected." Graves nodded grimly. "We do this quickly, or we do it not at all." The two ships entered the outer perimeter of the orbital station's sensor range, and the team went into full stealth mode. They used every trick they had: low-profile navigation, encrypted signals, and holographic decoys to remain unseen. Even so, Graves couldn't shake the feeling that they were being tracked. As they neared the station, the tension among the team reached a boiling point. Every minute, it seemed like they were one step away from being detected. Graves glanced at his team. Each one of them was focused, determined. There was no fear in their eyes, just resolve. They had come this far, and they would do whatever it took to stop the Council. The station loomed ahead, massive, imposing, and bristling with the advanced technology of the Galactic Council. This was their nerve center, the heart of their operations. If they could disrupt this, they would have a chance. But that was a big if. As they docked with the station and made their way to the core, Graves felt the weight of the mission bearing down on him. Every step took them deeper into enemy territory. The silence was deafening, and the only sound was the hum of their footsteps on the cold metallic floors. "We're almost there," Elena whispered, looking over a terminal. "The core's just ahead. Once we plant the device, we'll need to get out fast." Graves nodded, his hand gripping his weapon tightly. They had made it this far, but they weren't safe yet. The hardest part was still to come. But as they rounded a corner and approached the communication hub's control room, something happened. Graves stopped dead in his tracks. His heart skipped a beat as the unmistakable sound of blaster fire echoed from the hallway ahead. They had been discovered. "Ambush!" Graves shouted. "Move!" The team sprang into action, their weapons drawn, as they rushed toward the control room. The sound of combat filled the corridors, but Graves couldn't afford to focus on the fight. They had to reach the core. They had to get the device planted. Without it, the rebellion's hopes would die in space. They fought their way forward, but the Council's forces were everywhere. It was clear they had been expecting an attack. How had they known? Graves' mind raced, but there was no time to think. They had to win this fight, or they would never get another chance. The fate of humanity depended on it. Elena's voice broke through his thoughts. "We'll be at the station in 2 hours. Once we get there, we'll have to move fast. The Council's sensors are sharp. They'll notice us within minutes if we don't stay undetected." Graves nodded grimly. "We do this quickly, or we do it not at all." The two ships entered the outer perimeter of the orbital station's sensor range, and the team went into full stealth mode. They used every trick they had: low-profile navigation, encrypted signals, and holographic decoys to remain unseen. Even so, Graves couldn't shake the feeling that they were being tracked. As they neared the station, the tension among the team reached a boiling point. Every minute, it seemed like they were one step away from being detected. Graves glanced at his team. Each one of them was focused, determined. There was no fear in their eyes, just resolve. They had come this far, and they would do whatever it took to stop the Council. The station loomed ahead, massive, imposing, and bristling with the advanced technology of the Galactic Council. This was their nerve center, the heart of their operations. If they could disrupt this, they would have a chance. But that was a big if. As they docked with the station and made their way to the core, Graves felt the weight of the mission bearing down on him. Every step took them deeper into enemy territory. The silence was deafening, and the only sound was the hum of their footsteps on the cold metallic floors. "We're almost there," Elena whispered, looking over a terminal. "The core's just ahead. Once we plant the device, we'll need to get out fast." Graves nodded, his hand gripping his weapon tightly. They had made it this far, but they weren't safe yet. The hardest part was still to come. But as they rounded a corner and approached the communication hub's control room, something happened. Graves stopped dead in his tracks. His heart skipped a beat as the unmistakable sound of blaster fire echoed from the hallway ahead. They had been discovered. Ambush. Graves shouted. Move. The team sprang into action, their weapons drawn, as they rushed toward the control room. The sound of combat filled the corridors, but Graves couldn't afford to focus on the fight. They had to reach the core. They had to get the device planted. Without it, the rebellion's hopes would die in space. They fought their way forward, but the Council's forces were everywhere. It was clear they had been expecting an attack. How had they known? Graves' mind raced, but there was no time to think. They had to win this fight, or they would never get another chance. The fate of humanity depended on it. The ambush hit them hard and fast. The moment the team moved into the narrow corridor leading to the control room, blaster fire erupted from all directions. Sparks flew from the walls as the first few shots landed, and the group instinctively scattered for cover. Sergeant Michael Graves crouched behind a large metal column, his pulse hammering in his ears. His eyes scanned the hallway, calculating their next move. They were trapped, surrounded by the Galactic Council's elite guards. "Elena, where's the core?" Graves shouted, his voice barely audible over the crackle of blaster fire. "We're almost there," Elena replied, her voice tight with strain as she peered around the corner. "Just past the next junction. We need to move quickly, or we'll be cornered." Graves nodded, his mind racing. They had no choice but to fight their way through. The device they carried, designed to scramble the Council's communication network, was the key to their survival. If they could just plant it, the rebellion would have a fighting chance. But first, they had to make it to the control room alive. "We need to break through and get to the core," Graves said, his voice low and determined. "Cover fire on my mark." His team acknowledged with a series of nods and quick gestures. Graves gripped his rifle tightly, calculating the distance to the control room. With a swift movement, he popped out of cover and fired, sending a burst of laser fire into the advancing Council guards. The team followed his lead, returning fire as they sprinted down the hallway. But the Council wasn't going to let them escape that easily. The enemy soldiers were equipped with advanced combat armor and energy shields that absorbed most of their shots, forcing the rebels to retreat and regroup. Graves' heart pounded in his chest. Time was running out. They couldn't afford to waste precious minutes in this firefight. "Get to the door," Graves yelled. "We make a run for it." With a synchronized move, the team broke cover and sprinted towards the control room entrance, their weapons raised to cover any advancing attackers. As they neared the door, Elena fumbled with a small device, an access key, before slamming it into the control panel. The door hissed open, and the team rushed inside, locking it behind them. The control room was a mess of glowing consoles, holographic screens, and alien technology. It looked exactly as Graves had expected. A command center for the entire Galactic Council fleet. From here, they could communicate with ships across the galaxy, issue orders, and monitor every corner of the universe under their control. This was the heart of their power, and it was about to be their undoing. "Elena, now," Graves barked. Elena didn't hesitate. She dashed to a nearby console and connected the scrambler device to the control panel. The countdown began. The hum of energy filled the room as the device powered up, sending pulses of interference across the system. They were doing it. They were jamming the Galactic Council's communications. But just as hope flickered in Graves' chest, the lights flickered, and a cold, mechanical voice echoed throughout the room. "Intruders detected. Security breach imminent." Graves' blood ran cold. It wasn't just the guards anymore. The whole station was on alert. They had triggered a full-scale security lockdown. "We need to go," Elena gasped, looking up from the console. "The system's overloaded. The countdown's done, but the alarms are signaling the fleet. They'll be on us in seconds. Graves cursed under his breath. We don't have time to wait for the extraction team. We have to get out now. Before anyone could respond, the door to the control room exploded inward with a deafening crash. The force of the blast sent them all tumbling to the ground. Graves rolled to his feet quickly, drawing his sidearm as a group of council soldiers poured into the room, weapons raised. They had no choice now but to fight their way out. Cover the exits, Graves shouted as he grabbed Alina and pulled her behind a row of console desks. We'll make our stand here. The soldiers advanced, their weapons aimed directly at the rebels. The battle erupted in seconds, with blaster shots filling the air. Graves fired in quick bursts, narrowly avoiding being hit as the enemy advanced with calculated precision. His mind raced, trying to come up with a strategy, but the numbers were stacked against them. We can't hold out for long, Alina shouted, returning fire. We need a diversion. Graves looked around the room, his gaze scanning the complex machinery and blinking consoles. There had to be a way to turn the tide in their favor. His eyes landed on a large energy conduit running along the wall. It was connected to the station's power grid, a potential weakness. Alina, he said, can you overload that conduit? She looked over at the conduit, then back at him. It's risky. It'll cause a massive explosion. But if we can blow that conduit, it'll disable the station's power grid for a few minutes, long enough for us to get to the shuttle. That's all we need, Graves said, determination setting in. Do it. Alina scrambled to the terminal, typing in commands with lightning speed. The hum of the system shifted, and a low vibration ran through the walls. They were running out of time. 5 seconds to overload, Alina shouted. Everyone, get down. Graves barked. The rebels dove to the floor as Alina hit the final key. The energy conduit exploded with a deafening roar, sending a shockwave through the room. The force of the blast knocked the council soldiers off their feet, temporarily stunning them. Now, Graves yelled. The rebels surged forward, pushing past the disoriented soldiers, and made a break for the exit. They had only moments before the backup power kicked in, but for now, they had a brief advantage. Graves and his team ran down the corridors, the flashing alarms still blaring, but the station was in chaos. The rebels' chances of escape were slim, but it was all they had. They reached the shuttle bay, but there was one more obstacle, a massive blast door that had sealed the entrance. With the station's power grid in disarray, the door's automatic lock had engaged, trapping them inside. Alina, you've got to get it open, Graves shouted. She ran to the control panel, but the system was glitching from the overload. It's locked. I need time. Graves didn't wait. He grabbed a plasma cutter from one of the fallen soldiers and began working on the door. The seconds felt like hours, the pressure mounting as the sounds of reinforcements filled the air. Every footstep, every noise was a reminder that the clock was ticking. They had no more time. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the blast door groaned open. The team sprinted through, piling into the shuttle as the doors slammed shut behind them. Take off. Now, Graves ordered. The shuttle's engines roared to life, and within moments, they were hurtling away from the station, leaving the chaos behind. As they broke through the atmosphere and into the void of space, Graves allowed himself a brief moment of relief. They had made it out alive. But the mission wasn't over. The Council was still out there, and they had just taken the first step in a war that would change the fate of the galaxy forever. The shuttle soared through the void of space, leaving the burning wreckage of the Galactic Council's station behind. Sergeant Michael Graves didn't have time to rest, though. His mind raced as the red lights of the shuttle's cockpit blinked warning after warning. The escape had been close, too close, and now the true weight of their mission began to settle in. The rebellion had just taken its first real shot at the Galactic Council, and while they had escaped, their enemies would soon come for them with everything they had. Graves knew they couldn't afford to stop or rest. The Galactic Council was ruthless and vast, every planet, Every system, every ship was under their control. A small group of rebels couldn't hope to take them down without a plan. But as the shuttle accelerated toward their base, a grim determination settled in Graves' chest. This was just the beginning. "Status report," Graves said, his voice low and steady, cutting through the tension in the cockpit. Elena was at the controls, her eyes focused, while the rest of the team was securing their gear in the vac. Their mission wasn't over, far from it. The scrambler device they had planted at the station would cause confusion for a while, but it wasn't enough to win the war. It was just a crack in the door, and Graves knew that they needed more. Much more. The Galactic Council wasn't going to fall with a single shot. "We're almost clear of their detection range," Elena replied, glancing over her shoulder at him. "We've got about an hour before the Council can track us again. After that, we're going to be running blind." Graves nodded. Time was their enemy, but it was also their opportunity. The Council would be scrambling to regain control of their communications, but soon enough, their forces would regroup, and they would be hunting down the rebels with everything they had. The stakes were rising, and every moment mattered. "Good. Keep us on course," Graves ordered, his eyes narrowing as he looked out of the viewport. Stars stretched across the dark canvas of space, but his thoughts were elsewhere, trying to piece together what they'd learned from the mission. The Galactic Council's response had been swift and decisive. It had been clear they hadn't expected an attack from humanity. Humans were beneath their notice, after all. But now they had the Council's attention. The rebellion wasn't just a nuisance anymore. They were a threat. The team fell silent for a moment, the hum of the shuttle's engines the only sound as they sped toward their hidden base. Graves' mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, but one thing kept nagging at him: the Galactic Council's reaction. The mission had been important, yes, but it hadn't been their first. The Council's soldiers had been ready and waiting, as if they had known something like this was coming. "Elena," Graves said suddenly, a thought striking him, "can you access the records from the station before we lost power?" She blinked, surprised by the question. "I can try, but the system's pretty locked down after that scramble." "Why?" "I have a feeling we weren't just dealing with random soldiers," Graves said. The Council's response was too fast. They were waiting for something. His voice trailed off, the pieces clicking together in his mind. The Council knew they would strike, but why? Elena's fingers flew across the control panel, pulling up records from the station's systems. After a few moments, she frowned and turned back to Graves. "You're right. I've got access to the security logs. It looks like they were already tracking rebel movement long before we got there." A cold chill ran down Graves' spine. "So, they were prepared for us." Elena nodded grimly. "I think we've just stumbled onto something bigger than we realized. This isn't just about communications or sabotage. The Council's tactics, they were anticipating a rebellion, even before we made our move." Graves clenched his jaw, a dangerous thought brewing. The Council wasn't just reacting to them. They were playing a game, one they couldn't afford to lose. If the Galactic Council was already tracking rebel movements, it meant they knew everything about their plans. This wasn't a rebellion anymore. It was an all-out war, and humanity had just unknowingly walked right into the enemy's trap. "We need to warn the others," Graves said urgently. "Get us to base. We're not the only ones who need to know what's coming." Elena nodded and rerouted the shuttle's course. "We'll be there soon, but we won't be safe for long. The Council's forces will be on high alert now, and they won't take kindly to this little stunt we pulled." "I know," Graves said, his voice low. "But we got no choice. We fight or die, and we're not going down without a fight." As the shuttle hurtled toward their base, Graves turned his mind to their next move. The Council was too big, too powerful for a small rebel group to take down head-on. But perhaps there was another way. They needed to outsmart the Council at every turn, hitting them where they least expected. It wouldn't be easy, but if humanity had learned anything from this first strike, it was that they could still surprise the enemy. They could still win. "Get the team ready for a debrief," Graves said, standing up and heading toward the back of the shuttle. "We have a lot to discuss." The rest of the team was waiting, their faces a mixture of fatigue and determination. They had survived the Council's first retaliation, but the battle was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. Graves could feel the weight of the mission pressing on him. The Galactic Council had underestimated humanity, but now the real war would begin. The fight for freedom, for the future, was no longer a dream. It was a reality, and humanity would rise, no matter the odds.